Hi, Pastor Jerry here with New Hope Baptist Church, and today for our new book review called What If Jesus Had Never Been Born by Dr. DJamesKenndy and Jerry Newcombe. This book was actually an old book because it was written in the 1994, so quite a bit. Actually, I was 14 years old when this book was written, but it was republished in 2001. And I just read it. It's been on my shelf for a while. I've been wanting to read for a while. And it was just an enjoyable book to read. The premise is based on first ask the question, if Jesus had never been born, how would the world be different? And to understand how the world would be different, we need to understand what Christianity brought to the world. And if we understand what he brought to the world, then imagine you take Christianity out of the world and you would not have those positive influence that Christianity brought into the world. So it's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. And it's by Dr. DJamesKenndy, as I said. He's the person I found late life, and he's gone to be with the Lord. He was a pastor and a minister at Coral Ridge Ministry in Florida, and he was a president of Evangelism Explosion International and the chancellor of Knox Theological Seminary. And he just I enjoyed listening to him on the radio, is how I got introduced to him. And wasn't that long since I started to listen to him that he had passed away, but I enjoyed listening to his messages. Another person is Jerry Newcombe, who's written several books, documentaries, excellent. He also has worked with Clover's Ministries to produce stuff and help edit and write some of Kennedy's books with him. And he also has hosted a program called Monday Night Live and also Vocal Point, which was on radio in South Florida, but is now online. I encourage you to check out Jerry Newcombe. He has done some excellent work as well. But today we're going to talk about this specific book, What If Jesus Had Never Been Born? And the book just goes throughout history and looks at different events and different subjects in history and how Christianity has affected a positive change in the world. And let me actually just read the back of the book. It says this: seldom in history has a clamor of anti-Christian sentiment grown more vocal than today, as followers of Christ are often characterized by hypocrites, legalists, and zealots. Entering the challenging arena is Dr. DJamesKenndy and Jerry Newcombe, speaking out of the tremendously positive impact that Christ has made upon humanity. Embracing the entire spectrum of our experience, civil liberties, medicine, the arts, economics, sexuality, education, morality, this compelling narrative presents substantive arguments to respond to the challenge of caustic and often misinformed critics. In a fascinating, highly and reliable manner, the authors introduce the results of their extensive research, well equipped with biblical, sound, historically correct information. And that's true, it is. And to understand, this book is going to give you a good overview of these events. Each one of these topics, each one of these chapters, you could go greater in depth on. And so let's just quick look at what are the different chapters and basically what they're about. And there's a total of 16 chapters. But the first one is Christ in Civilization. Christ in Civilization. And just a quick overview, and it starts off with is that Christianity and Christ and Jesus has had tremendous influence in all areas of civilization, There isn't a part of our culture in any part of the world that has not been impacted by Christianity. Even other religions want to include Jesus in their own religion because of his influence in the world. And so politically, religiously, artistically, everywhere, Christianity has had impact in the world. But then he goes on the second one is it's an image of God. Christianity impact on human value. And really this is the one of the most important differences because in the past, human beings were just seen as an animal, maybe an animal that could reason, but no more valuable. There was no intrinsic value and you could own human. Women were devalued, were not think very highly of. Children were not thought very highly of. Those who had sicknesses and illnesses were not thought very highly of. And it was Christianity that says, no, human beings have value and we should treat people as having value because they're made in the image of God. Chapter 3 is that compassion and mercy, Christianity contribution to helping the poor. And that is true. One of the biggest areas that most people do not realize, especially secular people, is that Christianity was always on the forefront of helping those people who are in need, taking on the mantle of good Samaritans. I mean, even and that's really organized. Good Samaritans person, how they've helped people who have been in need and reaching out to those who have in need. Christians were often the ones who go out when there's a flood, a hurricane, disasters, terrorist attack, wherever you may be. Christians are often the first ones on the scene ready to help. In fact, they're often the ones who help out those who are struggling with drug addiction or those who are struggling with illnesses. Christianity is often the ones on the scene to help people through difficult times. Chapter 4, education for everyone, Christianity contribution to education. And truly, Christianity really took education to another level. Before Christianity in the Western culture, there was philosophy and there was rhetoric, but that's as close as it got depth for really understanding. It had some degree of natural sciences, but it was really never a study really of science or in math because the way the ancient Greeks and Romans says, everything's up to the gods. The gods decide. There isn't a stable world. It changes. But when Christianity came in and transformed everything, it said, no, the universe has logic and reason because it's created by God with logic and reason. That the world is stable and sustainable. And so it really saw the world in different eyes, and that opened up the doors for natural sciences, math, and other science and education. There also was through Christianity that Christians want to actually study the Bible and share the Bible with others. Well, that means people have to know how to read and write and learn and be educated, and later on to understand how God made the world and study. And so Christianity was really a big push for education. The next one is chapter 5, government of the people, for the people, by the people, Christianity impact on the founding of America. And that specific is what the chapter is. It's about America, how the Christianity, you take the Enlightenment, you put them together in a new colony, in the new world, and you get to the United States of America. And one of the key things about the United States of America was that understanding that we are all equal before God, that there's no government, no one who has more authority over us except those that we give power to. I believe that I understood that people are sinners and therefore we should not give too much power to government because they're sinners, will use it for their own advantages. So we put checks and balances in it. It really said the government is for the people. We want to empower it to keep our rights safe, but we do not want to give them too much power or else they'll use those powers against us. And so our modern idea of a democratic republic or a republic of the United States of America really comes from a Christian enlightenment understanding of them. Freedom for all, and we're talking about civil liberties and even and at one point it was Christianity that led to the initial end of slavery during the medieval ages. Eventually, it would come back with the introduction of it from Africa, from the Muslim countries who reintroduced African slaves. But later on, it was Christian abolitionists that led to abolition movement to set the slaves free, and eventually it's through Christianity that gave civil liberties to minorities, that said you could have the same rights as white white people, and black people have the same rights, and Asians, any ethnic group, all have the same civil rights. That you there's no reason to treat one racial group different than another racial. They should be treated equally and the same. And it was a lot of Christian influences that led to that eventuality. Also should also say that also led to the civil rights for women. Have women the right to vote? Women have the right to own property. That is also kind of tied in with that. Another thing is thinking God's thoughts after him, Christianity impact on science. I already kind of talked about this earlier, just kind of got ahead of myself. But the way science, what they are doing, what venture came with, like I said, science wasn't really well developed before Christianity because, again, they didn't think the world was rational. And so they had a very overly simplistic view of the natural sciences. It was Christianity that said it's logical and reasonable, and we can understand how God made the universe. We can understand the weather. We can understand biology. We can understand different aspects of things. And so, really, science, a lot, in fact, some of the great scientists of our age, modern the founding fathers of scientists. So you think of Newton and others, were all Christian in nature, and so Christianity has been on that forefront of science. Um, and even some people who think, well, wasn't there a fight between Christian and science? But no, Christianity has always been interested in science to understand how God made things. Now, the answer to some of those questions may differ, but Christianity is not a science stopper. It was actually a science starter. Next, it goes on to uh, free enterprise and work ethic, and very much there is that Judeo-Christian work ethic that was part of Christianity, also part of Judaism. The idea of one, most importantly, capitalism, private property. These are things you work hard for what you earn. That it is not just you don't just receive stuff, but you have to earn your pay. If you don't work, you shall not be paid. As you should not eat, as Paul would say, and that people shouldn't just live off the system. In fact, he even said that if you're a widow, but you can get a job or you can find a husband or whatever. If you have a way to provide means that you shouldn't put it on the widow's list, only those who are really, really, really in need should be put on the widow's list, and will help them out. And so there was a work ethic. It becomes more clear as you come to the West, the Puritan influence and North America when they came here. There's a strong work ethic, and it's really made North America successful, more successful than South America, because unfortunately, though you did have a Catholic down in South America, it didn't have the same work ethic as what the Puritans brought with them to the New World in North America. But as we know, capitalism is the best way to rise people out of poverty. The only problem nowadays is people, due to government regulations and influence, it's kind of corrupted capitalism. But what capitalism, as it should be and done in a good godly way, is a very important to raising people out of poverty. Chapter 9, the beauty of sexuality, and really understanding sexuality, first of all, is a good thing. It's not a negative thing. Having children are a good thing. It's not a negative thing. That marriage between a husband and wife, and no one else, and that was something that Christianity brought that was not thought of per se. Christianity is really unique on its sexual ethics, that you shouldn't be having all these illicit affairs with different people, but you should have one woman, a husband and a wife, and they should have their children. And the nuclear family is the best place for a family unit. It's also what's best for society. It's why governments have given tax write-off to marriage people who are married for the longest time, was because it created that stabilization factor in society, and we want to promote it. The healing the sick, and Christianity, as I mentioned earlier, they were always on the forefront of helping those who are in need. And even back to Jesus' time, remember, he was the one who was going around healing the sick. His disciples would do the same. And even during the Middle Ages, during the time of the Black Plague, it was the church that was ministering to those who were sick and dying. And it was early church who took care of those kids that were abandoned, who were exposed, who had just died. It was a church that went in and saved those children. There's a lot of the church hospitals that were created to help those who are in need, who need physical health. And though there were some aspects where Christianity was shy understanding human biology, but once it did, it really opened up the avenue. And the church has been a big proponent for medical science throughout the ages. Uh, Civilizing the of the uncivilized, and reality, despite what some people think, despite what they say, oh, those colonizers have caused so much problem in the world. Before Christianity came to certain places, you think of India, you think of Africa, you think of China, you think of Vietnam, you think of all these places that, even America, before Christians showed up, it was a very uncivilized, a lot of time almost Stone Age type societies. A lot of times, they enslaved people. They were uncivilized places where they did not take care of the environment. They did not take care of other people. Very much tribal warfare. Very where women would in India would die for their husband. If their husband dies, they would die in their husband's funeral pow, cremation bed. And so it was Christianity that went into these places, these uncivilized places. And when Christianity goes in and says, there's things called human rights, human values, that you're made in the image of God, it's what makes civilization, brings people from an uncivilized situation or a civilized situation, where it makes life possible. And it's Christianity that makes uncivilized civilized people. And I think of the tribes uh, in the movie End of the Spear. A missionary goes there. They bring Christianity to these headhunters, and they eventually not only do they become believers, but their whole civilization is changed for the better because Christians came to minister them to the gospel. The inspiring the world's greatest artwork, and they truly are. I mean, some of the best. You think of mosaics, you think of frescoes, you think of paintings, you think of sculpture, especially during the Renaissance. There, some of the most beautiful artwork has been done under a Christian influence. You think of some of the beautiful music that originally a lot of it came out of the church culture that came in and brought up create beautiful music, and the most ultimate case would be Handel's Messiah, and just this beautiful musical classical music came from uh, from a Christian perspective. In fact, a lot of the music of today borrows from that classical music, and all that classical music is still being used today, even though it's not paid homage to realize that that came from men who honored God. And so, and even some of the great movies you think of, the Ten Commandments of Charles Heston or Ben Hur, or some of these classic Christian music that classic movies that transform the world. I think of C.S. Lewis and his Chronicles of Narrows, and J.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. And uh, Christianity has had tremendous value, and of course Shakespeare. I mean, and the King James Bible and Shakespeare radically transformed the English language, radically so, and it would never be the same again. And that was due to the Christian influence. The next one would be Amazing Grace, and that just understand that the Christianity has the ability to change people's life. You think of John Newton as he goes from being a slaver of African slave captain to eventually uh, becomes a minister of the gospel. Would train up what's his name? Can't think of his name. But would train up people who would eventually lead to abolition and um, Wilberforce. He would train up Wilberforce, which will lead to the abolition of slaves in England. You and even in this book, as a recommendation, Charles Colson, who was one of the guys of Watergate, who was really a nefarious person at that time, and after he went to jail, he had a moment where he came to Christ. And at that point, he was a brand new man, radically transformed. I started a prison ministry and really have reached out to those in need of the gospel and has spoke into the culture. The gospel really has ability to radically transform people's life. You think of all these ministries that have reached out to um, alcoholics and such that Christians have gone to save them and transform them. And other ministries, you think of Salvation Army and other ministries like that. American Red Cross originally at one point, and even the sad thing, of course, as you know, you think of the YMCA and the WCA, which were at one point uh, Christian organizations that were focused not as a club, but at one point were about creating opportunities for young kids for after school so they wouldn't get in trouble. Um, but going on from there, the sins of the church, and that's one of the things that's good about this book because it would have been very easy for them just to focus on the positive impacts of the church. Unfortunately, there have not always been some stellar Christian examples. There's been some atrocities throughout the years. You think of there were some bad things that happened during the Crusade. You think about the Spanish Inquisition. You think about how sometimes the church has persecuted the Jews. You think about the Salem witch trials and other things. And unfortunately, the church has been the wrong side of some things. But the thing was, is when those moments when the church was not their best, and sometimes their worst, it was not by they were not acting like Christians. They were not going by God's word and God's truth. And if they were reading their Bibles, understood their Bibles, they would not commit the heinous acts as they did, and they would understood that they were sinning and were doing wrong. But I'm glad he includes that chapter because it's easy to ignore some of these things that unfortunately has done in the name of Christ. Um, the cruel world, and we really do. It's become more clear that even this book's time, that as you see Christianity being pulled away from the culture, as it being pushed aside by the secular culture, and people don't want its influence, they want to tear the feathers apart, as Psalm 2 would say. We see the damage uh, Christ being pulled, taken out of culture does. We see the sexual sin. We think of all the riots and evil acts that are being done. And it's because when you remove Christ from the culture, it leads to a cruel world. And so we really need Christianity. And that leads to the last chapter. Where do we go from now? And it's really having that impact for Christ. One, the most and foremost is preaching the gospel because people need a heart transplant. And until the heart is changed, you can change a lot of stuff, won't matter. People need to hear the gospel. Not only do they need to hear the gospel, but we need to show people what a Christ like culture looks like. And what does it look like for a fireman to be a Christian, or a policeman to be a Christian, or to be a businessman, or an electrician, or a lawyer, or a politician? What does it mean to be a Christian in your places of influence? And so I want to say that this has been a real good book. I really recommend. It gives you a good cursory understanding of how Jesus has had influence in the world, not just by his death, burial, resurrection, which is the ultimate transform, but even how it transformed the Western world culture. And so, and if you'll, some of you may know skeptics that question, well, Christianity hasn't brought anything good in the world. It's only about death and destruction. Well, have them read this book and they'll have them give an idea that no, Christianity has had a tremendous impact on the world. So much that they don't even realize how much Christianity has had an impact in the world. The other thing that I like to say about this book is each chapter really could be a book in itself. There's so much there, and you can see they're trying to keep it packed, keep it short, keep it succinct, and that's why I appreciate that it has in the back of each chapter. It usually tells you where you can go for further study in the book, and some other books that talk about those topics, because it really is just a brief introduction to how Christ has had an impact in the world. The other thing I will say this one other thing, and this would be my one critique is it sometimes feels a little triumphalism. It makes it sound like that none of these changes would have happened without Christianity. I don't know if that's 100% true. Did Christianity have a big impact on those changes? Absolutely. But was there some of those changes would have happened without it? Sure. Would have looked very different. Absolutely. So it did have that impact, but maybe a little too optimistic. But then again, that's why that one chapter talking about the sins of the church is important because it shows that the church does stumble, fall, and makes mistakes along the way. But let me just say, very good book. Highly recommend this book. What if Jesus had never been born by Dr. DJamesKenndy. Pick it up, read it, and you will be blessed. God bless you, and have a good day. If you like these videos, please like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. God bless you, and have a good day.